Hello everyone, today we are talking about perfect squares and square roots. So what is a perfect square? Well, it's a whole number whose square root is an integer. So those are numbers like 1, 3, 10, right? They're just not fractions or decimals. So for example, down here, 25 is a perfect square because 5 times 5 gives us 25. Now, on the opposite end of that, we have something called a square root. So the square root of a number is the number multiplied by itself that produces that given value. So sticking with that same example, if we say the square root of 25, which is what that little symbol is, this is actually called a radical symbol, but we read this as the square root of 25 equals 5 because 5 times itself, or 5 times 5, gives us 25. So you can kind of see how these are related. Perfect squares and square roots are called inverse operations, just like adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing. They are opposites of each other. Square roots and perfect squares are also really helpful when we're talking about squares, like actual squares themselves. So you can see these two pictures up here. We have a square that's made out of 4 squares, has the two sides of 2 by 2, because 2 times 2 gives us 4 total. Same thing here. If we take 3 times 3, we get 9 total squares. And so you can kind of see this over here. But to kind of break that down and summarize it, the area of a square can be found by multiplying the side times itself, right? So 2 times 2 gives us 4, 3 times 3 gives us 9. If you're looking for a specific side length then, so some examples of a problem might say a square has an area of 4. What is the length of its side? Well, you just take the square root of 4, and we know that the side length would have to be 2. Okay, so we are going to be focusing on the perfect squares 0 to 400, which feels like a lot, but it's only 20 numbers. So remember, we're taking that number times itself. So for example, 0 times 0 is 0, 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, good, so on and so forth. I want you to pause the video here and see if you can come up with the perfect squares from 0 to 10 on your own. All right, how did we do? We've got 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, and 100. So everything in this column over here, those would be considered our perfect squares. And these numbers without that little square with them, those would be the square root of those perfect squares. Okay, so the next ones are where it gets a little trickier, usually the ones that we might not have memorized as well. So let's go ahead and talk through these ones together. So we have 11 times 11 is 121. 12 times 12 is 144. 13 times 13 is going to be 169. And if you can remember that one, 14 times 14, or 14 squared, is going to be 196. 15 times 15 is 225. 16 times 16 is 256. 17 times 17 is going to give us 289. 18 times 18 is 324. 19 times 19 is 361. And 20 times 20 is 400. All right, if you have trouble remembering these 11 through 20 of our perfect squares, something that you can look at are there are some patterns between those first 10 and the last 10. So if you notice, 1 times 1 is 1, right? 11 times 11 also ends in 1. 2 times 2 gave us 4. 12 also ends in 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 13 also ends in 9. 4 both end, and 14 both end in 6. 5 and 15 both end in 5. 6, and you can see that this pattern kind of repeats itself all the way down. So if you can really memorize those first 10, it's going to be really helpful with at least kind of narrowing down your options for those 11 through 20. All right, before we go, we're going to look at some test taking strategies. So first one, how do we solve for perfect squares? We're going to circle all the perfect squares. So this is where you really just have to have them memorized. So our perfect squares from this list are 4, because that's 2 times 2. 12 is not a perfect square, but 36 is 6 times 6. 50 is not. 100 is 10 times 10. 144 is 12 times 12. 164 is not. 289 is 17 squared. 300 is not, and 361 is our 19 squared. All right, so continuing on with that, what is the square root of 196? Well, if you think about it again, it ends in a 6, and so if you're thinking about those first 10 numbers, 2 times 2 gives us 4, 3 times 3 gives us 9, 4 times 4 gives us 16, which also ends in 6, and our 5 times 5 gives us 25. So this one is 14. And you can see how those strategies kind of help if you don't have them memorized. Okay, how would we draw a square with 49 square units? So if we know that the area has to be 49 and it's a square with equal sides, then to find the side length, we're going to take the square root of that. So the square root of 49 is 7. So we want to draw a square that has 7 squares going this way and 7 squares going that way. And our last question, or I guess second to last question for the day, the area of the square below is 289 square inches. What is the length of each side? So again, they're giving you the area. They want one side length. We know that we need to take the square root of 289 for this one, and the square root of 289 is 17. Last one, a square window has an area of 324. What is the width of the window? So again, if it's that square, we want to take the square root of 324, and that is going to give us 18 inches for each side. All right, so there we have it. Those are perfect squares and square roots. Hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye.